Welcome, everyone, to New York Buddha Dharma. We are working our way through a text. How many people have did the reading for tonight? You tried? Huh? You fell asleep twice. Good. Well, that's great, so that I can make it up as I go along. What we're doing is we're working our way through a text called The Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. The particular Tibetan teacher who is the lineage holder for this group here was named Chogyam Trungpa. He's passed away, or left us in 1987. And but during his lifetime here in the United States, he every year almost took away a group of students for a period of about 3 months, and they studied and practiced together in what was called the Vajradhatu Seminary. And the seminary was divided into 3 sections: the Hinayana, or foundational vehicle section, the Mahayana, or the greater vehicle section, and the Vajrayana, or the adamantine or indestructible vehicle section, in that order. And every year he gave lectures on teachings from all 3 of those divisions. A few years ago, one of his students, Judy Leaf, digested those 13 years of talks. They were transcribed. I've got them in a space about 6 feet long on my bookshelf, I think. And she digested them into 3 volumes, which are called The Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. And they're divided into 3, and they're the Hinayana, our foundational vehicle, Mahayana, and Vajrayana teachings. And we are in volume 1, the Hinayana, and we're working our way through it. We're kind of using it as a structure to go through the teachings. It's an excellent structure. Trungpa Rinpoche himself, when he taught, relied on a text by the previous incarnation of his teacher. His teacher was a man named Jamgon Kongtrul of Shechen, and his previous incarnation was a very great teacher in the 19th century named Jamgon Kongtrul the Great, who left behind many works, one of which was a Treasury of Dharma, and Trungpa Rinpoche would study that before he came in to give his talks. And so these are based on that. We've been going through the Fourfold Path. You know, after the Buddha achieved enlightenment at what's now called Bodhgaya, under the Bodhi tree, remember that? He meditated for a night, and in the last watch of the night he achieved full enlightenment. And after that, he initially felt that he couldn't communicate or transmit what he had seen, that it was beyond words, until he ran into 4 fellow practitioners with whom he had been practicing previously, practicing austerities, and mortifying the flesh and doing all kinds of practices. And they at first thought that he had fallen from the way, because he obviously didn't look as though he'd been practicing austerities anymore. And then they realized that something was different in him, and they asked him for teachings. And he gave teachings. He gave them at what is called a place called Sarnath. It's outside the modern city of Varanasi. And there's a park there called the Deer Park. And in the Deer Park, he gave these 4 sannyasis, renunciates, the teaching of the 4 Noble Truths, which is the foundational teaching of Buddhism as we know it. And they are: the first truth is the truth of suffering, that there is suffering in this world. And the second is that there is an origin to that suffering. And the third Noble Truth is that there is a cessation of suffering. And the fourth is that there is a path leading to the cessation of suffering, from suffering itself to its cessation. and that we can practice that path. We are on the fourth, the path. This requires a bit of an understanding of what suffering is, because suffering is kind of the ground from which the path starts and proceeds. And what suffering is, we would distinguish between basically two kinds of suffering. One is the natural suffering of being in a human body. We have disease, we have old age, we have all kinds of problems that come up that are painful for us. You have an accident, you break your leg. There's pain in that, there's suffering. These kinds of sufferings are part and parcel of what it means to be a living human being. And one doesn't achieve cessation on the path from those kinds of sufferings. The kind of suffering that we're talking about here, that the Buddha was dealing with, is psychological suffering. And this is really what Buddhism is all about. It's all about not achieving some ideal physical state of being, but rather of working with one's mind. And what this suffering is about is wishing things were otherwise, in all kinds of ways. And basically all of our mental activity, all of our thoughts and emotions are grounded in that fundamental desire to have things be different. We don't want to have a repeat of that suffering we experienced in the past, and so we avoid it. We would like to have things be different according to some idea we have for the future, and so we pursue it. And our lives are driven by hope and fear, and there is a fundamental anxiety that pervades all of our thoughts. All thought. Every thought that occurs in one's mind is driven by this fundamental anxiety about concern for my welfare, either looking to the past or the future. All thought is about the past and the future. If it's about the present, it's about a present that happened a split second ago, and it's no longer now. And if it is totally in the present, there's no thought. There's just awareness, which is meditation, which is what we practice. So we practice continually in our meditation practice, coming back from thought. Thought about the past, thought about the future, thought which is driven by fundamental underlying anxiety about my welfare and what I want. Even if it's an anxiety about the world's welfare, climate change, environmental pollution, war. It's because we want to live in a world that is free from these things. We want it for ourselves, we want it for the people we love, we want it for our children, who are by extension, an extension of ourselves. And so there's this constant desire for things to be different in a way that we conceive to be better, or a desire for things not to repeat the unhappiness that we have experienced in the past. And it's really a shame, that our lives are driven so much by this. These thoughts are the stuff of what Buddhists would call karma. When one has any kind of thought like this, and we have them all the time, throughout our days, we are creating karma. The karma, you see, is this forward impetus towards a state that is imagined. So as soon as we have a desire or a thought about wishing things were otherwise, we are already in a forward lean towards the way we want things to be. And we are in the throes, we are enslaved to karma. This is the action of karma. And we are bound to some degree into enacting that dream. And we have all kinds of plans, don't we? We think about things, we write them down, reminders to ourselves to take care of the rent, to deal with this person who insulted us, to go after that person who we feel is congenial or makes us happy, whatever, all kinds of things, endless projects. And this is the action of karma. And it enslaves us in a very set of narrow ideas. And I say they are narrow because each one of us has ideas which are completely idiosyncratic to us. The person sitting next to you isn't having those ideas. They're having a totally different set. And they come out of our past. They are conditioned by our past. And we live these fictions, these stories that were written in our past and are continuing to be written now. It's like an ongoing screenplay that in which we are the hero or the heroine, and we are on a course away from unhappiness and towards happiness, towards an object of desire. And this is what a Buddhist means by suffering. Is that funny?
Yeah, just because it's not the
Huh?
just because it's not the conventional understanding of suffering,
What is the conventional understanding of suffering?
I feel like to many people that sounds
Could somebody pass the mic there and say? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, press the button.
I just laughed because to many people that sounds like a reasonable path. Like that's the way you do it.
Right.
You're unhappy and you make
You
your
pursue,
way.
you pursue happiness.
Yeah.
Right. And from a Buddhist perspective, this is a never-ending, it's like we're hamsters going around the wheel, It never ends, just continual. This is, in fact, the name for this is the wheel. It's the wheel of karma. It's called korwa, which means wheel, which means it's usually translated as samsara. And what samsara is an endless wheel of suffering. Samsara in Sanskrit, korwa in Tibetan. That way we're like hamsters on the wheel, going. It never ends. There's always the next thing. Because we are caught in the activity of constantly pursuing a chimera, an imagined goal. Yeah, the image for this iconographically is a snake biting its own tail. Just goes around and around. They show that in tankas and the Wheel of Life, maybe, things like that. So, the path then, fundamentally, is the path of meditation. And what meditation is, you see, is constantly coming back into the present moment. When we come back into the present, we are cutting that chain of karma. We are cutting that constant thought about wanting things to be different. When you come back fully into the present moment, I and other dissolve. There's just this. Here we are. This is what is the third truth. The truth is cessation. This is the way you achieve cessation, is by constantly remembering to come back. We start by working with an object of meditation like the breath. And you'll be thinking, and then suddenly you remember, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be watching the breath. Or I'm supposed to be watching my mantra. And you come back to that. And in the act of coming back 100%, you cut the chain of karma. You stop the wheel. And you come present, awake, which is the whole point of the path, to wake up. This is the path of Bodhi. Bodhi is often translated as enlightenment, but really what it means is waking up. Waking up from what? From a dream. A dream of what? A dream of the past and the future, and wanting things to be different, and coming back into the real world that occurs only in the present. And really what this path is all about is shifting our loyalty. Shifting loyalty from these dramatic, so engrossing, painful and pleasurable dreams that we have to this present moment in which the dreams dissolve and beginning to live like that. And that's what the Buddha did. That was the Buddha's awakening. That was his Bodhi. That's what enlightenment, which is a Western term, actually doesn't exist in the Eastern religions. It's kind of came out of the 18th century European renaissance of thought. They called it the Enlightenment. The people were going to get smarter. And it was adopted as a translation for Bodhi, but awake is much better. And in fact, the Buddha's name, Buddha, means the awakened one. Awakened from what? Awakened from the dreams. So our practice again and again, whenever we can catch ourselves, is to come back. That's all it is. Now, this path is elaborated in many ways. First of all, it's not about having an external deity of any kind. When in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism especially, Tantrism, we often conceive of and relate to deities that are external, like what you just had here with Tara. But these are expressions of our nature, of our own mind. Tara represents the compassionate aspect of being awake. And so when we call on an external deity, what we're really doing is calling upon that quality that deity represents, which exists, you can't say in me. It exists because there is no me and I and other fundamentally. Those are concepts, those are ideas. But it exists within the field of experience. There is a great thing that Trungpa Rinpoche wrote called the Sadhana Mahamudra, which we perform here every once in a while. And when there's a line in it, he's talking about how he's calling out for help, as though there were external deities that could help. And he says the idea of an external deity has deceived us and led us astray. So what we are really doing when we call upon these deities is we are calling upon our own intelligence and compassion to arise. Sometimes it looks like it's external. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it seems internal. And it's really fundamentally, in the last analysis, neither. So there's a particular way of describing the path, and it's in this chapter. You can read it, but I'm going to just give it to you in brief. Okay? It's called the 5 paths, and these are 5-fold division of the path, and they're really stages on the path to enlightenment. The first path is called the path of accumulation, and really what we're doing on the first path, we are listening to and beginning to practice the teachings. We are beginning to become, just like this discussion here about suffering, we're beginning to become sort of awakened to the idea that there is an alternative and what that alternative or alternatives might be. And this is, we're accumulating knowledge and we're accumulating experience, the experience of sitting and coming back into the present and of waking up. And we are preparing ourselves, this path of accumulation. In this text, he talks about it as joining relative and ultimate truth. In this context, it's a very sort of, these are very profound ideas, relative and ultimate or absolute truth. But in this particular beginning context, what they refer to is that relative truth is the way we conceptualize our experience. You know, there's a man, there's a cushion, I'm here, you know, I want to sit down. And we have all of these ideas which attach labels to this ongoing flow of experience that is constantly occurring. And we say, there is a person, there's a thing, here's an action. We sort of separate things out as though they actually had some kind of real existence, when in fact it's just a constant stream of presentation to us of the so-called 6 knowables, which are objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, the 5 senses, and objects of mind, mental objects of all kinds. They're constantly streaming through the present moment. And that's the relative truth, the truth of the existence of those things. The fact that they have no real existence, that they're like images in a mirror in this present moment, and that they're utterly, utterly transitory. You can't even hold on to them for a split second. And that is the ultimate truth, that we are in the middle of this insubstantial, constantly changing, shifting phantasmagoria of the 6 nobles. It's rich, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and it's disappearing as you see it. And the coming together of these is the foundation for this first path, the path of accumulation. That we begin to experience this in our meditation practice, and we begin to understand it through our study. The second path is called the path of unification, where you're actually beginning to embody the qualities of the path and of awakening. And he says at this point, you begin to develop a glimpse of sanity. And I'll bet you everybody in this room has had that, where you suddenly say, why else would you be here? Just backing up a second. Why would you be sitting there on the cushion doing absolutely nothing or trying to? I mean, if you hadn't had some glimpse that this openness, this awakeness, this effortless awareness was where sanity resides, true sanity, and that in pursuing our thoughts and their schemes, that is the path of craziness, suffering, insanity. And it has 5 categories, this path. Buddhists love categories. You know why, right? Does everybody know why there's so many 5s of these and 6 of those and 10 of those? And it's because when the Buddha was teaching, there was no writing. There was no written language. And as the written language began to develop in the centuries during and after his death, there was so little to write with and on. There was no paper. There were no printing presses. And so people memorized everything. And all of these things are mnemonic devices to help us memorize and remember the teachings. And even so, they changed a lot over the centuries. But that's okay in Buddhism. Buddhism, the teachings are very adaptable to the times and to the changing circumstances. That's part of built in. So these 5 categories are faith, that we realize what should be avoided, which is subconscious gossip and grasping. That's what we're thinking about all that stuff subconsciously. We present one face, but we're thinking another. We all have these agendas going on, And so what's being cultivated with faith is steadiness of mind and delightfulness. That as we come back into the present, there's a quality of freshness, of delight, of ease that we can touch in on and experience just by coming back. It's the simplest thing. Coming back. That's really what we want to do. The second one is exertion. Sondru in Tibetan, virya in Sanskrit. We develop confidence in our understanding of the truth, isness, suchness, more and more confidence. And this gives us the confidence to actually start to practice and act within the present moment, and gives us great joy and delight that we can actually take pleasure in what is arising in the present. He says our shamatha practice, what we're all doing sitting here on the cushion. Does anybody here need meditation instruction? There's some people here I don't know. No? You do? I'm sorry, we should have asked in the beginning. And if you come again, we can arrange that for meditation instruction. In our shamatha practice, you see, that's where we begin with meditation, is doing shamatha. Very simple practice. It has these 3 main virtues. Let me see if I can remember the third. The first virtue is that when you sit down to practice shamatha, you're focusing your mind one-pointedly on an object. And the virtue of that is that you begin to see how crazy one's mind is, our monkey minds, all these thoughts that we can't control, that keep coming up in spite of us. We thought we were going to watch our breath, and suddenly we're off in Timbuktu having a fight with our mother or our brother or somebody, And the second virtue is that you begin to realize that thought is utterly untrustworthy. It's short, it's changeable, it's utterly temporary, and it's very, very idiosyncratic to me, my particular thought. And the third virtue of shamatha, which we use the beginning practice, is that you begin to develop the ability to focus your mind in the present moment on an object. And in doing that, you achieve 2 things. You achieve rest, because you're cutting those anxious forward, past, and future-oriented thoughts and the anxiety that lies in them, so you actually get a rest. There's a teacher wonderful book, what's it called? Our Pristine Mind. And in it, the teacher who's written that book, his name is Organ Chowang, another Tibetan, says that this virtue is that it's like having a really good nap. which sounds trivial, but it's nice. It gives us a rest. And the third virtue, or the final one is, of this practice, is that you begin to develop the ability to concentrate. And you see, this is very important, that you start with an object, but ultimately you're going to concentrate. You're going to rest in an ongoing awareness of this present moment. And that is a huge virtue that you're working on just in this first of the two main practices. The third virtue of these five is called recollection. And what it means is that it's not memory, but it's the ability to sort of hold in the present moment as you sit here. And I see so many people who are just completely here awake in this moment. And then I see people who are going off into thoughts and then coming back, but that you know what's happened and what's going to happen. The fourth is called tingzen. This is a big word. It means samadhi. It means one-pointed concentration awareness. And it's what I've already talked about. And the fifth and last one is called intellect. Well, that's what we translated as the term in Tibetan is sharab, and in Sanskrit is prajna. And what it means is intelligence. You see, every time we come back into the present moment, you are seeing things much more clearly as they are. When we see things through the veil of the past or the veil of the future, we're putting an interpretation on them. You might see someone who reminds you of your angry mother, and you may not even know this person. You're just walking down the street, and yet you immediately have a prejudice about them because you are seeing them not as they are, but through this veil of past memory. Or you might see someone who reminds you of your lover, and you immediately have an attraction to that person, even though you don't even know them. So what prajna is about is beginning to cut through that, come back into the present, cut through those veils of the past and future, and see the world as we encounter it truly. And that's huge. That's huge. It takes tremendous awareness and attention. So I'll give you an example. There's a skill that is used by people who help other people psychologically, like psychotherapists, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, and coaches. And this is the skill of listening, how to listen to a client. Now, normally, what we often do is the person says something to you, the person who's sitting across from you, the client, the friend, whoever it is. They might say something like, gee, I just got back from Florence, Italy. And you, sitting there, immediately think, when was I in Florence last? Oh, yeah, I was in Florence 3 years ago. And it might even come out of your mouth, right? That's very, very self-referential. Everything you see rouses a self-reference. We don't even notice it happening most of the time. It takes a fair amount of self-awareness just to start to notice how self-referential we can be. The skill of listening is that you cut that. And instead, you get curious about that person. And you say, why did you go to Florence? How was it? What did you experience? How did you feel about it? And you're listening to that person. You're curious. You want to know what's inside them. And if you do that, you might even begin to sort of look at their way, their gestures, their physical expressions on their face, their bodily posture. And you get information from that you weren't even paying attention to when you were still self-referential, because you were thinking about the last time I was in Florence. Yes, Mike. Sorry. Okay, a little bit away. Okay, is that better? How's the sound level?
The sound level is good. It's just the popping.
The popping. Okay, I'll try and keep it away. We have a little difficulty with the sound levels for the recording. Okay. So, this is the path of unification, it's called. Now, really what the heart of the path of unification is this, is that we begin to develop an affection for the real world, which is this world of the present moment. more than an affection, we begin to appreciate its beauty as it arises now in its transience, its impermanence. It's passing away as we look at it. And that affection and that appreciation of the beauty is essential to the path. It's really at the heart of this path. It's beginning to appreciate that this world that we live in is worth being here for no reason at all. It's worth being here for fundamentally, in its own right. Not for because we might get enlightened someday in the future. That's the fundamental paradox of the path. If you live for the future, you never get there. It never comes. It's here now. And this is beginning to develop in this path of unification. We are beginning to develop the instinct. We're beginning to smell the odor of enlightened world, of awakened world. The third path is crux. This is called the path of seeing. Tung lam. Tung means seeing. Lam means path. This most often is communicated to the student at the hands of a teacher. And although people can get it by themselves too, it's just that it's easier and more likely in relationship to someone else who has already seen the path of seeing, because they can be trained to communicate it to others. And they call this experience of this third path various names in various traditions. In the Zen tradition, they call it satori, a flash of awakening. In the Tibetan tradition, it's called pointing out instruction, that the teacher gives the student points out what? Points out the nature of mind, of this mind. And what they are pointing out is that clear, open, utterly thoughtless awareness of the world in the present moment. This is the seeing. Until then, meditation is an attempt to do that, and the very attempt gets in your way. It's like when you try, you can't do it because you're trying. And this experience of the path of seeing is utterly effortless because it's not something we find or we do, it's what we already are. We just weren't noticing it. And what the teacher does is the teacher shows it to the student. If you want to read a section on this, there's a book that Trungpa Rinpoche wrote called Meditation in Action. And he wrote it, actually it was made out of his talks in England. And in there, he talks about the relationship between the teacher and the student, and how the student feels incredibly grateful to the teacher for having pointed this out. It's literally called pointing out. And even though they feel gratitude toward the teacher as though the teacher gave them something, but the teacher didn't give them anything. The teacher only showed them what they already had. And Trungpa Rinpoche says, but that gratitude is very necessary because it's a great slayer of egotism. Ego that I'm terrific, I'm special, I got it. Which is that egotism will get in your way and cloud the view of the path of seeing. And then once the student has this, the path of seeing, and he goes into some detail about some of the qualities of the path of seeing: joy, there's a tremendous joy that can arise, simplicity, that one begins to realize how simple the whole thing is, that it's not a matter of this big exercise or building up muscles or acquiring all kinds of knowledge. It's really a matter of utter relaxation. And more samadhi, more concentration, because you begin to be able to just relax into awareness, and equilibrium, evenness, because that's the quality of this awareness. These are all qualities of the path of seeing. But what happens is that after the person realizes that what this is, this experience of seeing, that then enables them to tread the path much more profoundly. And that leads into the fourth of the 5 paths, which is the path of meditation. And what the path of meditation is constantly realizing, oh, I'm thinking again, and coming back to this simple, effortless awareness of the present moment. That's the true path of meditation. And that's the 4th path. And finally, what they say happens in these 5 paths, you see, is that we have such habits, all of us, habits of neurosis, of samsara. This is our karma. That's what karma is. And by the way, every time you come back like this, into the present moment, you are cutting the karmic chain. You are taking one more whack at it and destroying that chain which enslaves us and waking up, coming closer and closer to being fully awakened. And they say what happens is you see all these habits of thought and of wishing things to be otherwise, of samsara, of suffering, are habitual. They recur again and again. How many times have you thought about that animosity that you have towards that one individual? How many times have you wished that your life were different in a particular way over and over and over again? Right? How many times have you wished, I wish I was thinner, I wish I was smarter, I wish I was more handsome, more beautiful, I wish I didn't have this problem in my life, I wish I had more money, whatever it might be. We have these habits, and they repeat again and again. And these habits, they say, occur, this is the stuff of karma. They occur in, this is another Buddhist mnemonic device, to help you remember. They occur in 81 grades, each one of them. And the grades are strong, 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 medium, strong, strong, weak. Strong, medium, strong, medium, strong, get it? And you get 81 of wearing them away. How do you wear them away? By saying, oops, I was caught again. I was dreaming, and you come back. And then when you do that, you don't reject that dream. If you reject the dream, you're giving away something valuable. You see it. If you can see it, it's transparent. And it's your particular style of dreaming. And in seeing it, and in coming back into the present, in saying, no, I'm going to shift my loyalty from that dream into being awake in the present moment. In doing that, you burn up the habit a little bit. And you have to do it over and over again. And eventually it stops arising. And when all those habits stop arising enough, you proceed into the 5th path, which is called the path of no more learning. There's nothing more to do because you have realized fundamentally, you have shifted your loyalty completely. And you realize fundamentally that this is it. And there's nowhere else to go. And there's nothing left to do except enjoy and explore and be curious about and interact with and be helpful in this world. To be helpful especially. That's common to all people as they progress along the path. They want to help other sentient beings. They are driven. The more you proceed on this path, the more compassion arises. Compassion for the suffering of the world and the suffering of others. It arises in 2 ways. One way is that you see people who are suffering in ways that you are no longer suffering. And you feel great sorrow and you want to help them. And you see how you can help them. That's the lesser form of compassion. And it's powerful. It's what drives Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, awakened beings, to help other people. The more profound form of compassion is that as you wake up and stop seeing the world as an I-other game, an I-other problem to be solved, then the connections between each of us become more and more important and obvious. The interconnectedness. That one person's sorrow, you can feel it. It permeates you. One person's joy, you can feel it. It bathes you. It's like you're utterly, there's a common field that we all inhabit at any given moment. And the compassion, you see, is the communication. That's really what the compassion at this ultimate level is. It's total communication with the field of experience. Openness, awareness, ability to empathize. It's kind of like when you look at that person, you can actually take a look at them, look into their eyes, and feel what's going on inside them to some degree. We could do that now if we want to take a look. So that's the fifth path, the path of no more learning. And I think I'll stop at that point, and we can have a discussion if you like. Pass the mic. And say your name, would you, so everybody knows.
My name is Ben.
Ben.
I was wondering about the third virtue. I believe it was the third.
Third path of seeing?
No, the virtue of recollection.
Oh, the recollection, yeah.
And I was wondering if that was a translation of Smriti.
It is. In Tibetan, it's Trungpa. Yes. In Sanskrit, it's Smriti. Precisely. Yeah. Why do you ask?
Often that Smriti is also translated as mindfulness.
It
But
is.
recollection might be a better translation.
Mindfulness is a word that's being used so much and indiscriminately. Trungpa Rinpoche preferred to define mindfulness as the capacity to stay focused on an object, which is close enough, but to be aware in the present moment. I think Smriti is perhaps better. You know, it's in Pali, you know, the Satipatthana Sutra. It's all about that. The Sati is Smriti. Yeah, it's Trungpa in Tibetan. Same thing. It's all about being here for your life, recollecting, you know, being present. Mindfulness means a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts. People are using it so variously these days as a translation. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you. No, that's all.
Thank you, Ben. That was a very informed question. Anybody else? Has this stopped conversation? Maybe everybody's just resting in the present. Huh? A lot to digest. Say use the mic. I can't hear you. You know, I'm hard of hearing.
I'm saying that, speaking for myself, I just want to contemplate. You know, I don't want to interrupt myself with questions, or you, for that matter.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
So don't think that nobody's interested.
Oh,
sure
no,
that's
that's
not
fine.
the case. Yeah.
The third path is it's really the crux, you know, because really what this whole thing is about is constantly giving up the suffering, going to the cessation. That's what the path is. The path is getting to the end again and again and again by coming back into this present moment which is full of rest and ease and awareness, awakeness. And ultimately, I'll tell you what, here's a hard one for many of us. Cheering up. This is a practice. It really is. I mean, we tend to be depressed. And depression really is absorption in samsara. We're thinking. I want things to be otherwise. We're thinking, you know. I'm unhappy that things are the way they are. I want them to be otherwise. So cheering up. Trungpa Rinpoche used to look at us and he used to sit in his lecturer's chair and he used to lean forward and he'd say, please cheer up. Over and over again. Please cheer up. You know, like that. I find the hardest time to be cheerful is when I wake up in the morning sometimes. You know, oftentimes because you're still caught up in mental events. Haven't quite woken up yet. I think that's an amazing meditation practice, injunction to cheer up. And to the extent that it's hard to do, That's like a measure of the extent to which we're stuck in our neurosis. Well, we could end. We have thankful to Rochelle. We have a lot of really yummy looking food. So for those of you who are tuning in, if you come live, you can have some really terrific snacks. Okay, so let's end with the dedication of merit again. Okay, we're dedicating this for all sentient beings. We're giving up our egos as we do this. Does anybody need the printed text? You do. Can we get 1, 2, 3? This is a traditional way of ending any teaching or practice session one does at home. You dedicate the merit for the benefit of other people. And actually, it's the twofold benefit of I and other, but you're putting others first. Rich needs one. They can share. Okay, here we go. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of Brigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.